Hey guys,
Hey there.
how was Vegas? Well, we'll get to that.
Vegas was rocking.
CinemaCon, Caesar's
Oh my
Palace.
God! I'm getting too old for this. I'll let you know. I'm still recovering, and we're recording on Wednesday.
Right.
I think it's Wednesday.
Yeah, it is the week after.
I just want to say something. It was great. You know, we'll get into it. We took the stage on Monday. For anyone who hasn't listened to it, you should go back and listen to our conversation with Michael O'Leary. I thought that was fantastic. And Colleen Barstow. But I was busier last week than I had ever been when I worked at Lionsgate. I got to tell you, it was crazy last week.
Mike, I saw Mike. He's like, I mean, it's everywhere. Like,
I was
Superman.
bummed. I couldn't get to the barbershop, Paul, and
I know.
Had a great time there.
We'll talk more about that. I did a series of interviews at the barbershop at the Cosmopolitan Hotel, which was fantastic. Had some great guests. We're working on the edit right now, so thank you for giving me that shout out. And this is now season 2, episode 9 of Ticket to Ride with Thaddeus Bouchard, Mike Polydorus, and me, Paul Garabedian. We're going to give you a rundown of the weekend, which was incredible, the Minecraft weekend. And then we're going to go through CinemaCon and give you a kind of a recap on the week that was. It feels like it was a year ago. It was just last week.
Right.
Well,
So let's talk about Minecraft, guys.
I think that's the biggest thing right then and there is nobody saw $163 million.
By the way, nobody
weekend.
did. If you can find me somebody that somewhere in print or somewhere predicted 163 opening weekend for Minecraft and 312.7 worldwide, no way. There's just no way.
That's biggest prediction I saw going into the weekend is somebody had it like there were a couple of tracking services that had it 85 and 90 is where it is. So basically it came in double of what the highest estimate is. Again, I don't think anyone saw that coming at all. Now I will say Friday morning or Friday afternoon I started looking really closely at the grosses and I had them at 160 Friday afternoon. So I want to take credit for that now.
Thank you, Mike.
So,
You corrected.
You know what's funny? Early in the week, I ran into people. I go, what do you think Minecraft? I'm talking at CinemaCon on Monday. Everyone was like 60, 70, and then a couple days later, 80. And then I ran into somebody on Wednesday. They go 110. I'm like, no way, 110 for the domestic debut. And you're right, it almost doubled that. The weekend, the entire domestic weekend came out to $203 million. That was about 140% or something like that, bigger than the same weekend a year ago. The entire month of March, according to our comms data, generated $410 million. This weekend generated about half that. In one weekend, the 4 previous weekends combined maybe didn't even add up to, probably added up to just over 200 million. So that's how you take a year-to-date deficit from 13% down heading into the weekend to 4.9% coming out of the weekend.
Well, and Paul, from an actual dollar standpoint, at the end of the weekend, where did we end up?
You mean for the full weekend?
No. In other words, going into the weekend, we were whatever it was.
Yeah, I'll find that for you. I'll get that. I'll go into the engine room and grab that for you right now.
You know,
you guys talk amongst yourselves.
What I wanted to do is go back to, and this is the topic from CinemaCon last week, and you know, it was very frustrating because for the last 3.5, 4 weeks, it's been the sky is falling.
Yeah,
and it has been, here we go again, theatrical was done, how do we do this? We can't launch movies. And then, we're trailing 2024. And my sense is by the time we get to this weekend, or at least out of this weekend, Paul, we'll have been even or pull ahead of last year.
I think so too.
So much for the deficit.
Exactly. Through heading into the weekend, we were at 1.475 billion. So 1.5 billion right now. Well, through the 6th, through Sunday the 6th. Let me do it through yesterday. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, because I think we're making up ground every day.
Go through
this point.
Through the 8th, and it's still a little early here, but 1.7.
So, you'd have to say we've just had the best Monday and Tuesday of the year, right?
Yeah,
you would think, right?
Well, and it goes back to, Paul, you sent the chart around on Friday. It's the biggest opening ever for a video game, which is pretty amazing. Yep. Biggest opening, since Deadpool versus Wolverine. Right. And isn't this
for all the talent, it was like their biggest debuts.
Yeah, and
all of them.
and for Warner's, is this
The biggest since Barbie, I think.
Yeah,
since,
no, I am. Yeah, because Barbie was like 160.
62.
Well, actually, was this actually higher than Barbie? I think at the end of the day, this came in higher than
You
Barbie.
know, go
That's
back
an
into the
interesting-
engine room.
Yeah, no.
I remember Barbie being 160 and Oppenheimer being 180. So
80,
the two
yep.
together,
Yep.
it's interesting. So we'll have to do a tail of the tape there to see which one
Yeah.
came out a couple dollars in advance.
So
Yeah.
Barbie opened to 1-2.
So
And this is one. I can get the exact. Man, that's close.
well, that's but again, the point being, this movie came out of nowhere from and again, I think we all started. We can remember that when the first teaser dropped, I think everybody was. I'm not quite sure where this is going to go.
Right.
It feels a little Jumanji. Is there going to be the audience for it? And each piece of material, there was a little more confidence. And I think, Paul, even what you were saying, how last week we went from 60 to 80 to 110, I think that was kind of the trajectory of the movie itself from expectations. It's just great for the business. It shows that if you give them content, as we always say, people will show up.
I want to ask you both something, though. Do you think the reason, I know we had a slow month of March, and momentum can, start any time, which it did this weekend. We certainly didn't have that in March. Do you think that the family audience is not underreported, undersurveyed?
No.
Like, in other words, how do you miss that,
So, think there are, and I had a conversation with somebody who does a lot of work on this, and they were saying that tracking is actually still pretty accurate. You just need to you just know how to read it. And I think the metrics are kind of changing a little bit on what you need to look at. But to your point, Paul, I don't think anyone estimated. In other words, the other thing too that was interesting to me on Minecraft was the way it played out day part.
Right.
So you had 16% that was before 1 o'clock. You had 28% that went 1 to 5. You had 38% between 5 and 8, and then you had 18% after 8. And to me, a family film doesn't necessarily play that way.
Right.
And that just showed a very steady trajectory for the movie. So I think what probably got underestimated was the Minecraft brand it's very similar to kind of Super Mario, where you've got the kids who are playing it now, who are all into it, but then you have the kids who grew up on it, who are now young adults who are into it and want to see it. And ultimately, the other thing you have, and I don't care what the Rotten Tomatoes score is, you had a movie audiences liked.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it bodes well. So
Can I talk about Chicken Jockey?
About what?
Chicken jockey. I just found out about this. There's a scene in the movie where Jason Momoa jumps on a chicken in a ring, and that's where the kids in theaters started throwing popcorn and getting super rambunctious. And it was their cue to do that. And I did a piece for Inside Edition yesterday, and they showed a lot of the footage. And somebody filmed one of the theater owners going, "If your kids don't shut up, we're going to kick you out, and you ain't getting a refund."
Right.
But you know what? I feel like with 300 million worldwide, have fun in the theater. But they had to clean it up before,
I think I read that story too, and I think they had to call the police to try to sort of settle down the crowd. I remember that.
Yeah. And again, I think what I would say on that is this goes back to, last year in the Taylor Swift movie where everybody was dancing and singing in the aisles. And that is, we as an industry need to kind of, as I always say, widen the funnel. And that means we need to not rely on the same old. And if people want to have fun and go Rocky Horror on the movie...
Within reason.
Within reason, obviously. But I think that's what separates us from being at home and watching the movie in your living room. And we keep saying we need to differentiate ourselves. And
that's one way to do it.
It is the only way to do it.
But isn't that what event cinema really is? It's an event going to the cinema, right? That's an experience. It's more than just what's on the screen. It's who's with you while you're at the theater and what's going on,
Thaddeus, I would even say it's not event cinema. It's more communal. And, you know, everything about going to the movies my entire life has been communal. And I've said this a million times, and that is
communal and interactive.
a comedy is funnier when you're watching it in a theater. A horror film is scarier. A thriller is more tense, you know.
Or Barbie is more fun if everyone's wearing pink. You know, it's the same thing.
Or
right?
if you're watching Minions and everybody's dressed as a minion.
Right.
Like, it does. That is the difference between, you know, one of the big differences between watching it at home and watching it in a theater.
Wait, Mike, you're not at home throwing popcorn around when the chicken jockey comes? You're not going to do that?
My dogs would be very excited about that.
And
that's like Tom Cruise singing into the microphone in Risky Business, right?
That's
That's
in the house.
exactly right.
So let's
talk about the week that was.
Let's talk about cinema. Oh wait, I have to give a shout out.
And Tom Cruise.
That's
and
right.
Tom Cruise,
Tom Cruise was there. But I want to give a shout out, and I did this privately, but I want to do it publicly, to Paulie and the entire team, Amanda and Will, because I said it in an email, those recaps, Mike, tell the audience what your team did after every presentation. Well, I'll set it up here. After every presentation, literally about, I don't know, within a couple of hours, maybe
Studio presentations.
There would be a full recap where you could pretend you had been there because you had you could tell me, oh yeah, I saw that when that happened. I mean, it's so fantastic. I don't know how we lived without the Paper Airplane CinemaCon studio presentation recaps ever.
You are being too kind, and I will pass it on to the team because, in all honesty, I had nothing to do with those. But
I know you didn't, Mike. No, I'm just kidding. It's your company, man. You're at the helm.
It was just so, you know, for the listeners, it was something we put together for our clients and colleagues. And basically, a few years ago, somebody had come to us and said, you know, can you guys provide us some recaps of the studio presentations? Amanda on my team, Amanda Ruffner, who anyone who knows her takes anything she does very seriously, set the bar very high on these. And they've now become the industry standard or the industry record almost of CinemaCon. And I actually went back, Paul, and I counted up using Amanda's notes. And there were 112 titles mentioned over the week. Wow. 82 of them had footage in some way that was shown to the delegates. And it was...
I think it's great, and I think you should put it. I mean, I'm sure you're already doing this, putting that. Right. I mean, I'm sure for the CinemaCon team to have that as a record, like in the congressional record, if you will.
Well, look, it is something we're really proud of, and it was a great week, and it's great notes to go back and, you know, as we start talking about what we saw, I went over over the weekend.
And not everyone could go to every presentation. Let's just be honest, it's a crazy week.
And some people aren't even there. Many people aren't even there, so you get to experience it from afar.
Even if you're there, when you're talking about 82 titles that have footage with it, I mean, it's hard to remember. I mean, literally, I went back. Oh yeah, that was really. I mean, there were certain titles that really stood out, and maybe we start there, and then we can go into the, or do you want to start with each studio presentation?
Why don't we go through each studio? However you want, whatever order you want.
So start with Sony on Monday night.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think, or else we'll be here 3 days.
Yeah.
We should probably go with the movies that, or the things about each presentation that kind of stuck out.
The Beatles, baby, the Beatles.
I was going to say, let's go right to...
Now, let me ask you guys something.
April of 2028.
Somebody asked me about this. Are these 4 movies... Each one is a different movie devoted to each Beatle, or is it different point of view, focusing on the point of view of Ringo? You know, John, Paul, George, and Ringo.
It was my impression, and again, we'll have to wait till April of 2028 to get it. This is the story of the Beatles, and it sounds like it's going to be from start to finish of that 6-7 year span that was the Beatles. Remember, it was really only, I think it was 64 through 70 is
they were only,
I
don't even think any of them were 30.
Yeah, and I think, though, Paul and Thaddeus, the way it is going to be is it's going to be the same story told, but from different perspectives. So they'll be intersecting each other along the way.
Amazing. Sam Mendes.
What was interesting, though, for anybody who wasn't there, is they are planning on releasing these like a Netflix series in a binge manner, and they didn't say what that is. I don't know if that means they're all coming out on the same day, or if that means they are, one week is one, another week is
Well, it
another.
could be like The Chosen.
I've
right?
had the impression it was going to be like The Chosen, so it's rapid fire, but one after the next.
Well, they said
yeah.
it was the first bingeable movie theater event.
I
don't
love
know
it.
if that's true, but because Chosen has been that, so
Right.
but I'm just
I think
excited
it's great,
no matter what.
and I'm all in on that. I think
April 20.
But we have to wait till April 28th, so that's the other thing.
Right now.
Yes, I did think the announcement on the new Spider-Man movie with Tom Holland.
Yep.
Actually, we got a date, and obviously the footage that we saw on Spider-Verse was another highlight of that.
Yeah.
And it was. I liked that they made it director focused as opposed to completely talent focused. So I thought that was interesting to see. Darren Aronofsky take the stage. Yeah. My favorite. This is. Darren's like, I wanted to do something fun, and then they show the caught stealing, and I mean. I guess in the world of Darren, that is fun.
That is,
I actually worked on Pi and Requiem for a Dream, which are very intense movies.
What a great film!
But it wasn't like Caught Stealing is the comedy event of the year. I mean,
that was a great presentation, and the cast came out. The Beatles cast, Barry Keoghan and Paul Mescal. I can remember now forever. Paul Mescal will play Paul McCartney. That's an easy one.
There you go, Paul.
And Barry Keoghan, and the other two.
Was there anything else about Sony that came to mind for you guys?
The Spider-Man stuff and the Beatles stuff was pretty epic. So pretty cool.
Well, last year, not all the studios were present, right? So that's another sort of part of the news of the conference is that all the major studios were there, including Amazon, which we'll get to, I'm sure. But
that's right.
The last movie I wanted to, the other one that made a big impression on me, and I think it's going to be interesting, is Bold, Beautiful Journey. And I thought, with Colin Farrell and Margot Robbie, and it just seems like a romantic drama that is kind of a throwback in ways, and I'm very curious to see where that goes.
Yeah, very cool. All right, what's next, Mike?
Then we went into Tuesday morning, and our friends from Lionsgate took the stage.
Yep.
And there were a couple of titles for me that stood out. Paul,
let me guess, Mike. Ballerina.
Right.
Ballerina, yes, but that was not the... Ballerina was what we were expecting. Anna Darmus going in there and, a big high-throttle action.
Yeah.
I was really... The movie that really caught my attention and caught from gathering, from talking to many people, was The Long Walk.
Yeah.
And that footage looked... I didn't know quite what to expect with it, but Francis Lawrence has done it again. He's created a new world, so to speak. It's world building of, a dystopian future, but, you have a walk where there's no end.
Yep.
And,
very interesting. Very cool.
Well, what I found to be interesting about that film is, first of all, Mark Hamill came out on stage with his glasses on and everything, which is just really enjoyable. But it struck me as a real throwback of a Stephen King film, right? Because it's sort of Stephen King at his best from 30 years ago, when he was starting to really make a name for himself, not just obviously as a best-selling author, but as a film, contributing to these tremendous films from back then. This felt to me like it was right in the series of, Mercy or something like that,
Yeah.
It was really just it looks like it's going to be a powerful film.
Yeah.
Two other movies from Lionsgate that caught my attention were Power Ballad, which Paul, you're going to love. Paul Rudd plays a aspiring film writer or aspiring songwriter who has a song kind of ripped off by a big pop star, and like it just feels like a feel good at the end of the day. We haven't seen one of those in a while, and this was my sleeper going into the convention. I don't think it's a sleeper anymore because I think it's now on everybody's radar, and that is Housemaid. Paul Feig, Sydney Sweeney, Amanda Seyfried. And it's a bestseller. Every woman's book club that I know is reading this book. This is going to be. I hate to jinx anything, but this is going to be. While Avatar will be the big story, this is going to be the quiet story. That's going to be like that was a great Christmas present for everybody.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, and then we should not be remiss if we didn't talk about The Weeknd coming out and doing a full-on two-set, concert with full band. with all
I like the weekend,
lighting.
man.
It was awesome. That was
Weekend is
fantastic. So Lionsgate gets major kudos on their presentation.
Very cool. Very cool. I like it. There's Lionsgate for you.
Okay, next up, we had our friends from Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
With their presentation.
So can I
Go
just,
ahead, Paul.
Can I just talk about Superman? I am so excited for this movie. Showing that extended footage, and again, Crypto, the super dog, jumping all over Superman. He's like, ow, stop jumping on me and take me home, Crypto. It's just brilliant. I think focusing on that dog for me is everything, but the movie looks absolutely amazing. I think this is going to be a DC movie that really, just kind of reinvigorates DC. They've had their ups and downs over the years, so to speak. And also, I think maybe the best thing that ever happened to Superman and some of these other movies is Minecraft. Because you had so many people in theaters around the world being exposed to in-theater marketing and trailers for all these upcoming films. And so if you can grab family audiences to go to something like Superman or some of the other movies that are in that wheelhouse, again, that in-theater promotion, the trailers are the number one and influencer for people other than other people. So yeah, really cool.
How about James Gunn with his inspiration for Crypto is his...
Yeah. You can sit there. So I'm incredibly excited for that. And then F1 is I'm a car guy and I love racing. Yeah, that one in IMAX is going to be, you're going to be edge of your seat. You're going to be in the cockpit of those cars.
I'm going to be completely honest. Going into it, I was a little concerned about F1. Every movie that has come out about Formula One has kind of struggled to find an audience. But what I underestimated on this was the power of Jerry Bruckheimer. And as soon as you saw that piece that they showed, for any of you old people like myself who have a throwback to Days of Thunder, this was very reminiscent.
Well, and Joe Kosinski, who directed Top Gun Maverick, is directing this. So, and I could tell, and I'll jump ahead for 1 second. Tom Cruise, I think, is very jealous that his buddy Brad Pitt gets to be in F1. You could just feel like Tom would love to be in that movie. And again, I'll go back in order, but Tom Cruise actually gave a really great anecdote about when he and Brad Pitt were shooting Interview with the Band. After they finished shooting, they go-karting. He said, Brad was a hell of a driver. I'm like, wow.
Well,
never heard that before.
He graduated from the go-kart.
Exactly.
And the thing about F1 is, I was just going to say, if anyone thinks this is a stuffy Formula One movie, it's not. Yeah. This is a big-time summer popcorn movie that is going to really deliver.
But you're right, Mike. They don't always deliver. I know that, and back in the day, you had the film Grand Prix, you had Le Mans, and then the one you just alluded to it, I think the one that Ron Howard directed.
Yeah.
The name escapes me at the moment, but they typically are not like that's. Oh, and by the way, this is one of the true original films, blockbusters coming out this summer. It's hard to find original IP. This is true original IP. Yeah, Joe Kosinski and Brad Pitt are in a way IP because people know them, but that's not enough to, you can win a Best Picture Oscar in your next movie. Could not do well. So
the thing about that film, I feel it's going to be the premium large format, the IMAX film of the year. I mean, because it's so well suited for that, and also, we have all of these motion seats that are starting to make their ways into exhibitor locations as well. And can you imagine being in a 40X seat, sort of doing this doing this as Brad?
I'm going to go buy one of those little steering wheels for kids.
It's like going to the baseball game with your mitt, right?
Exactly. I'm going to bring my helmet. I have a car racing helmet. I'm going to walk into the theater.
So the other movie in the Warner presentation that I think got everyone's attention, and I don't think anyone was expecting this, and that was Final Destination.
Oh yeah.
When they showed that clip, and they clearly know exactly what they have, they're very self-aware of the movie, and they're having fun with it. The entire auditorium gasped, but in a good way. It was, that movie's going to work.
Yeah.
Big time.
And Sinners, is coming up this weekend.
Yeah.
That looks amazing. Ryan Coogler, Michael, what a pair. And what this is reminiscent to me of like that Us or Get Out kind of vibe. And it looks really good. I think Warner's could have a lot of number one. I mean, after Mickey 17 and the Alto Nights, which I think they're on the precipice of having at least 2 or 3 number one weekends for their openers that are coming up.
So let me throw a question out there. It's a little bit of a deviation, but let me throw a question out because it's interesting because we all follow the news because we're in the industry, so we're following the news constantly. And there's all this, we had the doom and gloom of the box office of Q1, but there's all of this sort of executive suite turmoil that's going on in the industry as well.
Yeah.
So we all entered into CinemaCon week with those things in our mind because we're reading about them all the time. And now we're talking about the joy of the actual movies and the movie slate that's coming out. And I think it really changed the attitude to some extent of the people who were at CinemaCon anyways. I don't know if that was your impression.
It's my in fact, it just shows what a difference a day makes or a week. And there was kind of no worse setup for CinemaCon than the terrible month of March, but then there was no better way to come out of CinemaCon than to have Minecraft do what it did.
I think irony is can be a great friend to people on both sides, one way or the other. And in this case, it was very ironic. We went into CinemaCon with the world's coming to an end, our business is ending, and then by the time we come out, it's like, oh look, we're fine. And that unfortunately is just the nature of
we say that, Mike. How long have we been saying that for? All of us?
I think our last podcast was focused on that, the box office roller coaster, right?
Well, and that is, and again, the pendulum will always swing one way or the other. And again, I'm going to say it's content based, and I know we have a few. There are definitely issues in our industry that need to be addressed, and I think those came up over the week, and we'll talk about those if we don't get to them this week.
By the way, though,
next week.
By the way,
highlights from our friends at Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
And then, as Thaddeus mentioned, there was a new kid in town this time around.
A big kid.
Yeah.
It was a big kid who moved onto the block. He's got a lot of toys. His name is Amazon MGM.
That's right.
And I got to tell you guys, I was really, really impressed with what I thought was a diversified slate. It felt like a throwback. They're not relying on formula and existing IP, so to speak. And I think we should talk about the first thing they showed, and that was the Project Hail Mary footage.
Oh, yeah.
What'd you guys think?
Yeah.
I thought it looked spectacular. I thought it was well presented. I think that they did a great job as a studio as a first-timer presenting their slate. There was a lot of enthusiasm in the audience. The room was packed. So I think they did a great job.
I thought seeing Ryan Gosling come out and then talk about putting this together and seeing this big scope, sci-fi movie that looks like it's got a lot of heart coming out.
Yeah.
I'm all in on it.
And that's original, right? I mean,
it's totally original. But then, other things that they showed with Chris Pratt coming out with Mercy, which, looked really a lot of fun. You have, Crime 101, the Julia Roberts, Mark Ruffalo movie. Like, in other words, when you looked at all of these different films, what you were able to see is a diversified slate. It felt like we're going to try to bring audiences back in. We're not going to give them the same old. And if anyone can do it, it's Amazon.
And too, Mike, if you go back to like Manchester by the Sea, which they released, I mean, even early on, they understood the power of theatrical, even though, of course, they had their small screen offerings, but they kind of really strategically picked and chose which films they would put in the theater. So Amazon has some DNA, going back
what Amazon
with the theater
also has what they have, and they alluded to it in a very important way, and that is the power of Amazon, meaning they touch hundreds of millions of people in the United States every day.
Yeah.
And they're not afraid to use, whether it's the Prime ordering screen, whether it's just tape on a box that says, Project Hail Mary is opening on whatever day it is.
They did that for Red One, I recall.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. Like, that is... you talk about new age marketing and ways of taking advantage. In my mind, like, they're not afraid to lay it out there. And I think that's something that is going to be very, interesting to watch over the next, 18 to 24 months.
Well, that's part one of our CinemaCon recap.
Yeah.
Like, what do we have next? I think we have Angel Studios, Universal,
Paramount, and Paramount.
And Paramount, which, by the way, people know, but Tom Cruise came out. Chris Aronson did some stunt bike riding.
Well, I think that the one thing we're not leaning into as much here as we're talking about the films themselves is the amount of effort that all of the studios put into these presentations.
Yes.
the talent that was
and the
there,
stars, yeah.
the passion about the theatrical experience.
Yeah.
If there
it
was
means a lot. Yep.
If there was any doubt about the dedication of these companies to theatrical, it was laid to rest. Now, again, several issues came up, and again, the exhibition community and the studios are, I won't say divided, I would say they are discussing in how some of these issues affect each side of it. But overall, it was from the content providers coming out, they brought the goods.
And there was,
I want to say it was a lot of fun sharing the stage with you fellas and Michael and Colleen.
Wonderful time.
I thought that was
and well done.
great.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That was.
and there's video on YouTube, people.
You bet.
And we're on all the platforms, so Ticket to Ride is everywhere you want to be. I think that's somebody else's tagline, but anyway, we've got to wrap it there. That's part one, people.
Okay.
So, I mean, guys, I don't know. I see people talk to their listeners.
Yes.
It's either guys or whoever, but we want you to come back and for episode 2 of our CinemaCon recap. So thanks, guys.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Great.
Thanks.
We'll see you at the movies.
Okay.
See you shortly, okay?
See you shortly.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.